Every story has a good guy and a bad guy, depending on your frame of reference. If you were a car company executive in the 1970s, Nissan was the bad guy. See, before then, nobody wanted to be caught driving a Japanese import. That is, until an economy brand called Datsun decided that they were going to start building sports cars. They didn't have the powerful V8s of the American muscle cars, and they didn't have the prestige or the luxury of the European performers. So, they worked with what they did have. A price tag of $3,500 and a production team that actually bothered with build quality. With those two things, they released the Fairlady Z and shipped it out all over the world. Turns out, people were willing to ditch the pedigree for a car that doesn't break down all the time. And with new regulations slowing down the muscle cars, drivers turned to smaller vehicles that could handle the corners. It was a perfect storm in the sports car market, and Nissan filled the gap. Nissan had been around for quite a while before they really got popular. In the decades after World War II, Westerners were hesitant to buy cars from a company that had the Japanese rising sun as their logo. As the years went on, tensions following the conflict eased. Nissan slowly started exporting cars to the United States and Europe under the brand name Datsun. Mostly small economy cars, they had a few cool little whips and a neat roadster, but people looked at them as cheap, expendable vehicles. In 1969, Nissan set out to change that. They released two new cars, the sleek Fairlady Z and the brutal Skyline GTR. They kept the latter to themselves, it was only offered in Japan. The rest of the world got a very special sports car called the Datsun 240Z. The car was named after its 2.4-liter inline-six engine. It wasn't a fast vehicle in a straight line, but it had enough torque to pull the lightweight chassis through the corners. The whole thing only weighed about 2,400 pounds. The Z was a handling machine, and more importantly, it was fun to drive. The American auto market was dealing with a lot of political controversy at the time around big performance engines. Throughout the 1970s, Americans were watching their favorite cars get slower and slower every year. The Datsun Z showed up just in time to take advantage of that, and as emissions laws got stricter, they'd just throw a slightly larger engine in the car to make up for the lost horsepower. As a result, we got the 240Z, 260Z, and 280Z. All three cars sat on the same chassis, but the later models had larger motors, more safety features, and a few more creature comforts, making them a whole lot heavier than the original. Entering the American market forced Nissan to jump through all sorts of hoops to make their vehicles legal, but they were playing the long game. American and European companies were dealing with the same restrictions. The Nissan Z car was able to absorb the new regulations because it was never focused on straight-line speed in the first place. People loved the Z, so much so that they're still cool today. Thanks to the help of our friends over at DPAN GT, we got to take a look inside a place that most modern Datsun owners would consider a paradise. This is Resurrected Classics in Auburn, Georgia, and these guys are a huge benefit for people restoring old Nissans.
These are all of our kind of parts cars.
As mentioned earlier, a lot of these cars came from the collection that we found with like 30 cars.
Right.
And we just use them for parts and body cuts and just little engine stuff that it helps us to find.
Yeah.
You know, if we're working on a car, we can just come out here and find the part.
Because a lot of times people will need like a really tiny part or something like that's not remade. So the only option is to kind of buy like a used part. So we kind of have these out, and then people can come by and you know, pick what they need, and it's been like a really valuable resource, you know. Here we have a 1972 Fairlady Z. It's imported from Japan. It's a right-hand drive. Since it's from Japan, it has a few different features than our US models. Got a 2-liter engine, and it's got a rally clock and a couple of more little kind of neat features that the US spec cars didn't have.
So there's different regulations depending on where you purchased the vehicles from.
Yeah, like in Japan, their maximum engine size was a 2-liter engine, so 2.0.
Gotcha.
Most ones we find, they were imported back in the day by like an armed forces person. You know,
Okay.
That's usually the easiest way they can get them in.
Yeah,
You know,
that makes sense.
it's difficult to import these, so you just don't see them very often.
Yeah.
This is a 1971 240Z. We picked it up as a roller, and we decided to build a personal car for our company, and we put an LS6 in it. It's a V8 engine.
Can we do this?
Yeah, these are black pearls.
Okay, yeah,
They're
like
like
cross border.
a limited run.
Okay.
In 1978, they made it varies, but they say 1,200 to 1,500 black edition cars.
Okay.
They would give one to each dealership. These are the only factory black Z's from 70 to 78.
Imagine riding around that bad boy back in the day. All the girls be like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah. It's a pretty expensive package. It's pricey.
Back in their showroom, they had a fully restored Black Pearl, among other incredible old Datsuns. The guys at Resurrected Classics are providing the community with increasingly rare parts. And the team at DPAN GT are supplying custom aftermarket badges for these vehicles. Everybody still loves old Datsuns. By 1979, Datsun was not an underdog anymore. The Z had become an extremely successful vehicle, and the competition was moving in. Mazda, Toyota, and Honda were all trying to get in on this massive new wave of business. For the upcoming 1980s, Nissan decided to play in a different league. Second generation Z car would not be a budget sports car. This time they were going after Corvettes and Porsches. It was called the 280ZX, the X signifying luxury. This car is almost 50 years old, and look at this. We've got fully electric windows, fully electric mirrors. I've got a little computer that runs through my systems and tells me if there's anything wrong under the hood. Got lots of legroom in here. I mean, you can drive across the country in one of these and stay comfortable the entire time. It was heavier than the original, and engine requirements were more stringent than ever. So rather than having to build yet another motor, Nissan kept the L28 and turbocharged it. Once again, Datsun devastated the car market. They successfully made Japanese cars cool, forever. It was awesome, and Nissan knew it. They were so confident in that fact that they made it the slogan for the car. It was the last sports car to be badged as a Datsun. In the early 80s, Nissan spent $500 million rebranding their dealerships to reflect the parent company. They had a brand new tagline: "The name is Nissan." They had become a global company that rivaled all of the big names. Throughout the 80s and 90s, they had the money and resources to focus on speed. The 300ZX was upgraded with all the newest technology, and the inline 6 was replaced with a more modern V6 engine. The new S13 was finding its way into the enthusiast market as well, as they held up very well to modifications, and their mini trucks had become a hit. The world loved Nissan, and we weren't even getting their best cars. Back in Japan, the company was releasing all sorts of exciting rides. The Gloria, for example, was a luxury car that we never got here in America. Also known as the Cedrick, this was a very popular car in Japan. They offered a few different engines, from an inline-6 diesel to a turbocharged high-speed V6. This one has been modified by our friends at Showstoppers, Georgia. If you want one of these, you're gonna have to get it imported from Japan. Meanwhile, the Skyline GTR had been evolving as well. By 1989, it had become a high-end, all-wheel drive, twin turbocharged sports car.
We built the entire motor. I put brand new wheels on it from Skull. My name is Caleb Sentz, and I have a 1990 Nissan Skyline GTR. I've upgraded a few performance parts on the underside. I'm still working on that, so that's going to be in the progress. It's got a full built-in roll cage. When it came over from Japan, it had the cage in it, and I just liked it, so I decided to keep it in there. It also did not have a back seat because it has a cage in it. So yeah, it's this one I get a lot of questions about. A lot of people ask me like, hey, what's it like driving on the right side of the car? And I'm not gonna lie, the first time you get in one, it's really weird, very strange. But I bought this in North Carolina, and about the 4-hour trip home, I was pretty much good by the end of it. R32s have always been a dream of mine. Extremely fun.
The Nissan GTR was the king of Japanese performance throughout the 1990s. The RB26 engine was capable of handling way more horsepower than they gave it at the factory, and tuners across the world were quick to start modifying the GTR to its full potential. The sleek new Z32 300ZX also got turbochargers, and turned heads wherever it went. The 240SX would evolve quite a lot over the years as well, eventually becoming the capable S15, which would turn out to be a very desirable track vehicle. This period of time is what most people consider to be the golden age of Japanese sports cars. By now, they were incredibly popular all over the world. Nissan had a reputation to uphold. People expected their cars to be fast, so for the 2000s, they took it to another level. The Nissan 350Z was a hero in the underground racing world. It was in movies and magazines and pretty much every street racing video game ever made. For the new millennium, Nissan caught the hearts of a whole new generation of car lovers. The early 2000s also gave America their first thing resembling a Skyline. Only it wasn't called the Skyline here. It was badged as a luxurious Infiniti G35.
So the VQ motor is rated for about 280 horsepower. It can go from 0 to 60 in like around 6 seconds, which is really impressive considering this car is around 3,500 pounds. So realistically, it gets around a little under 250 to the wheels. The turning radius on it is pretty good. The steering wheel is really reactive. So, I mean, you know, it's pretty reactive, and I didn't think this car would pick up as quick as I did. It actually handled really well. So performance-wise, it does way better than I thought. I think the interior of this car is ahead of its time for sure. This one's a 2005, so the fact that they have, you know, powered seats, the really cool like analog stuff, and how comfortable it is. The styling of the car definitely gives it an early 2000s flair. I like it. It handles well. It's got a nice interior. It's a good luxury sports car. This car is pretty cool.
It was at this point in filming the video that we realized we were being followed. A rogue drone was spying on us from above, and despite my best attempts at air-to-air combat, I couldn't catch up to it. We did not particularly like being spied on, so we decided to call it a day. The early 2000s were good years for Nissan. The G35 and 350Z were extremely popular and very well received. For the 2010s, Nissan focused on refining these successful models. The all-new 370Z had more horsepower and faster acceleration than ever before. It was a world-class race car by now. The G35 was upgraded to the G37. Both the 370Z and G37 got a brand new, high-powered 3.7-liter V6 engine. This sixth generation of Nissan sports cars was incredibly capable. They were good at drag racing, they were good at road racing, they were good at drifting. The Fairlady Z had become a well-rounded, respectable sports car. The interior quality was bumped up significantly, and it still retained that long hood and sloped rear end that the Fairlady Z was famous for. This was also around the time the United States would finally get a GTR, the R35 model. A savage, unrelentingly brutal Japanese sports car like the world had never seen before. It went from 0 to 60 miles an hour in under 3 seconds. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of footage of the R35, or the brand new twin-turbo 7th generation Nissan Z. But as far as lap times go, we do have footage of something much, much faster. The Ligier JS P320. A very French car built for the very French sport of Le Mans racing. The P320 is a Le Mans prototype race car, and like all LMP3 cars, it's powered by Nissan's VK56 Nismo engine, a naturally aspirated 5.6-liter V8 that makes over 450 horsepower. That's a lot of power for a car that weighs less than the original 240Z. This is the Petit Le Mans at Road Atlanta. The cars and drivers here are pushed to the limit for 10 straight hours and late into the night. As you might imagine, that's a lot of time for things to go wrong. It is an incredibly dangerous sport. A car like this needs to be durable and powerful. The Nissan engine is a big, rumbling, very American muscle car style V8. The French Ligier and all of the other LMP3 prototypes trust this Japanese engine to stay running throughout each race. Nissan, Nismo, and Datsun are all names that are permanently seared into the history of motorsport. The new Z is one of the only sports cars left with a manual transmission, and the old Z has set its place in history as arguably the most important Japanese performance car ever built. The GTR is a street racing legend, with people putting an incredible amount of time and money into shipping them here from Japan. The 240SX is possibly the most popular drift car in existence. I challenge you to find a drift event that doesn't have these sliding around. When Nissan builds a sports car, it becomes an icon. The Western car manufacturers absolutely did not want this company to be successful. Despite the competition, Nissan has managed to capture the hearts of driving enthusiasts for half a century now. They came, they saw, they conquered, and they owe that legacy to a tiny economy sports car called the Datsun 240Z.